Today, we're going to count down the top 5 albums from Judas Priest. And I've already had people threaten to beat me up over my list. Hi, welcome back to Classic Guitar Rock. I'm Jeremy, and today we are counting down the top 5 albums of Judas Priest. And you'll want to wait till the end because number 2 may surprise you. But that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So let's start with number 5. Coming in at number 5 is Sin After Sin, released in 1977. Now, this is an interesting album for a few reasons. Roger Glover of Rainbow, Deep Purple fame was the producer. And this was an interesting period for the band. They had a young drummer they brought in for the album, a guy named Simon Phillips, that you've probably all heard of, who went on to play with Michael Schenker. He played with Toto. I mean, he's just a renowned drummer, excellent drummer. And he was one of the originators of the double kick drumming, and now it's just kind of a standard. Everyone does it. Well, he was one of the first ones that did that. And I think he was only like 18 or 19 at the time when he played on Sin After Sin. And Judas Priest wanted him to join. He had other commitments and couldn't do it. So after this was recorded, they brought in Les Binks. And the reason they brought Les Binks in is he was one of the few guys at the time that could also play in that double beat, really intense style. So Les Binks came in on this album, but this is a great album. It has, let me see, I'm looking at notes here just so I remember, because there's some great albums. Sinner, Diamonds and Rust. Guys, Diamonds and Rust, which is a classic tune. What a lot of people don't know is this is a remake of a Joan Baez folk song. And it's a Priest classic. Diamonds and Rust, a great song. It really demonstrates Halford's vocal ability. I mean, Rob Halford's awesome on every album, but this album especially, I think he's really good. Starbreaker, Last Rose of Summer. Priest had some great ballads over the years, and this is one of those. Just a beautiful song. Let Us Pray, Call for the Priest, Raw Deal, Here Come the Tears, Dissident Aggressor. Just some great songs. Not many classics per se. I mean, you got Sinner, Diamonds and Rust. Those are definitely classics. But the rest of the album is really solid. And this is just a really good album. That's why I have it coming in at number 5. Coming in at number 4, depending on where you live, it has 2 different names. Okay, if you're in the UK or in Europe, it's called Killing Machine. For those of us in the US, it was released as Hellbent for Leather. Either way, whichever version you have, it's a great album. This was the first Priest album that I owned. I borrowed a Priest record, actually a cassette. It belonged to my friend's brother, and he left it in my brother's car. And this is the first Priest album that I really got into. This is around 1980. This was my introduction to Priest. And this is a great album. Delivering the Goods, Rock Forever, Evening Star, which I don't know why this one isn't considered a Priest classic, because it's one of my favorite Judas Priest songs. Just a great chorus. It's got the mellow verses and kicks in. It's just a great song. Hellbent for Leather, obviously. Take on the World, kind of a cheesy anthem. Burning Up, Green Manalishi, that's a Fleetwood Mac cover. Killing Machine, Running Wild, Before the Dawn, Evil Fantasies, close it out. Again, this is another great album. This features Les Binks, great drummer. And this is Priest really was getting into... By this time, they were a heavy metal band, right? They had the trappings there. That really kind of came in with Sin After Sin. and stained glass, where they started the whole look. I think this is the one where it really went over the top, with spikes all over, and that was the look, right? This is where Rob starts riding the Harley out on the stage to sing Hellbent for Leather and all of that. So this was really kind of where Priest was becoming the Priest that we all think of when we think of classic Judas Priest. And it's a great album. Coming in at number 3, this album really kicked the door open. British Steel, I guess we could say British Steel kicked the door open, but Screaming for Vengeance ripped the door off the hinges, right? This was the album that really broke them in the US. This came out in 1982. And I remember by the time this came out, I already owned Hellbent for Leather, British Steel, Point of Entry, and I remember going to buy this album. I think I bought it. It came out in July of 82. I bought this in July of 82 at Kmart, of all places, in Spokane, Washington. That's where I bought it. And I took it home and listened to it. And to be honest, it kind of had to grow on me, because this is a much different sound-wise than the predecessor Point of Entry was, and even British Steel was. This was much heavier. The Hellion comes in, and it's this very harmonized, heavy guitar intro, breaks right into Electric Eye. And after a few plays, I really started digging it and really got into it. I loved Electric Eye. And that was always my favorite song on the album. Bloodstone, I loved. It was funny when the video dropped for Another Thing Coming. You Got Another Thing Coming, which was a few months later. I was shocked because I had already been playing this album for a month or two, and I was surprised that was the one that became the hit, because that was one of my least favorite. I didn't dislike it, but it definitely wasn't on my top half of favorites on the album. I much preferred Electric Eye, Bloodstone, even Fever, which some people kind of diss. They say it's kind of poppy sounding and cheesy. I thought it was a great tune. This is just a really good album. And this was just a new Judas Priest that was heavier, riding like the wind. Think of how fast that was. Screaming for Vengeance, the song Screaming for Vengeance. These were like bordering on thrash metal tunes. The drums were just going crazy. And these were just great albums. Great albums. I say this because the follow-up album, which did not make my list, by the way, Defenders of the Faith, kind of continued on in this vein to not quite as great effect, in my opinion. A good album, but not as good as Screaming for Vengeance. So coming in at number 3, 1982, Screaming for Vengeance. Coming in at number 2, and this is where the threats have come from. This album is a very divisive album among Priest fans. Some people hate it. Some people love it. I love it enough that it's my number 2 favorite Priest album. And of course, I'm talking about Point of Entry. Point of Entry came out in 1981. A lot of people kind of pan it for being too radio friendly, not heavy enough. I don't understand that. I think it's just a great album. It's not as heavy as Screaming. I'll give you that. But in my mind, 40 years down the road now, almost, I think Point of Entry holds up better than Screaming for Vengeance. Okay, you listen to the production of both albums. Screaming for Vengeance has a lot of processed cheese guitar sound that just doesn't hold up as well. I think Point of Entry sounds better. The guitars sound better. I think the drums sound better. I just prefer Point of Entry to Screaming for Vengeance. You got great tunes on here. I mean, we've got Heading Out to the Highway. We've got Hot Rockin', which was kind of a dumb song. It was a video song, but it was a good song. Heading Out to the Highway, solid. I mean, that is classic Priest. One of my favorite tunes, Again, great double bass song, Desert Plains. Phenomenal tune. And guys, there are some songs on here that I don't know why they aren't held up as Priest classics. You never hear mention of Troubleshooter. Troubleshooter is a catchy, rockin', great Judas Priest song. One of my favorite Judas Priest songs. On the Run, Solar Angels. I love the more atmospheric, textural sound of Point of Entry. Don't Go. Yeah, it's kind of poppy, but in a cool way. I just think this is a great album, and I don't know why it doesn't get more love. It comes in at number 2 on my list. And coming in at number 1, this is probably no big surprise to anyone. 1980s British Steel. And this was a big album, huge album. It wasn't it wasn't quite the commercial success of Screaming for Vengeance, but this really opened up the US to Judas Priest. I mean, we had Breaking the Law, we had Living After Midnight, and those are the 2 songs that, I mean, even people that aren't Priest fans, even people that aren't metal fans probably know Breaking the Law. I mean, it's in a State Farm commercial now, for goodness sake. So this was a big one. But even outside of those 2 songs, guys, I mean, we got Metal Gods on here. That's maybe my all-time favorite Priest song. Great tune. You've probably all heard the story about the production of this album. It was in one of John Lennon's old mansions where they recorded it. But so much of the production was very creative. You know, the sound of the marching robots, the marching metal gods in Metal Gods, that was members of the band shaking trays of cutlery. You know, they're recording microphone cords being smacked on guitar cases and adding a bunch of reverb and delay to that to get a lot of these, you know, lightning bolt effects and all kinds of crazy things. KK Downing talks about it in his book Heavy Duty, and in other places you can hear them talk about the production of this album. This is just a classic album. Everyone should own it, whether or not you're a Priest fan. If you had to own one Priest album, British Steel is the one. Of course, Halford's amazing. Glenn and KK are amazing. In terms of the classic Priest albums, this is the one you have to have. This is the number 1 Judas Priest album. I want to go out and crank it as soon as I'm done here. I haven't heard it in quite a while, so I want to listen to the whole thing. So, my top 5 Judas Priest albums. Coming in at number 5, Sin After Sin from 1977. Number 4, 1978's Hellbent for Leather, or Killing Machine in England. Number 3, 1982's Screaming for Vengeance. Number 2, and don't hate me for this, number 2, 1981's Point of Entry. And number 1, from 1980, the classic British Steel. So what do you think? Am I right? Am I wrong? I know I'm crazy about number 2. Everyone tells me that. But other than number 2, am I right? Am I wrong? I'd love to hear your comments. Thanks for watching. And if you haven't done so yet, take a minute and subscribe. And we'll see you next time on Classic Guitar Rock. Bye-bye.